Happy Friday. All right, thoughts from the car today. So I want to talk today about why people fear authenticity, signs of someone who is an authentic person, why to be more authentic, and how to be more authentic. So I'm going to try to put that all in there. Okay, but ultimately it's about why people fear authenticity, but why we should do it anyway. Okay, so why people fear authenticity. I think that the biggest thing is the societal rejection, social rejection, rather. Oftentimes people, when we have conflicting beliefs or viewpoints from others, we can be rejected socially. And so oftentimes people will not be their most authentic selves and express their viewpoints or live authentically, live those viewpoints, live those values and beliefs, because they don't want to be rejected by socially. This often happens in groups, organizations, with cultural groups, when you are gathered with people with the same belief system, and same values. And maybe yours differ a little bit. You might not be as authentic about those things because you're afraid of the social rejection that can come within that group of people, within that community. Another reason why people often are afraid of living authentically is fear of vulnerability. When we are vulnerable, that means we're being honest and open with our thoughts, feelings, emotions, etc. And oftentimes people have been in spaces where they were honest and open before and vulnerable, and they were then hurt. They were criticized, they were judged. And so people will pull back from doing that again, and not live as authentically because they're afraid of that rejection, that criticism, that judgment, and they have been hurt and they don't want to be hurt again. And so they're afraid of the vulnerability piece of being authentic. I think sometimes people reject authenticity and are afraid of it because of difficulty with conforming, meaning it's easier to conform sometimes than it is to go against societal norms and going against the expectations of those around you. This goes for people in families, people with in communities, very close communities. And so it's just easier sometimes to conform rather than living authentically, living as your true self, because it's just easier to conform. Again, you don't want the rejection, you don't want the criticism, you don't want to be hurt. And you know, I've mentioned it, the fear of judgment is a big thing. And so for people who are people pleasers, especially because they have been hurt before and they find that conforming just makes it easier, you don't get judged as easily. So when you are afraid of judgment and you are a people pleaser, you're not necessarily going to be authentic with your thoughts, feelings, emotions, ideas, opinions, and even your own beliefs and values. I think there is also a huge potential disappointment when we are authentic. That means we put it out there. We put our intentions out there. We make it known. And so people fear that sometimes because they don't want to fail and be seen as a failure. Whenever there might be a failure or a setback in something, they don't want to experience that disappointment. When you're authentic, that requires risk. And so those who don't want to experience disappointment oftentimes will hold themselves back, and not live an authentic idea to risk, or they won't step out of the comfort zone. They fear it because they don't want the disappointment. I think a lot of times people fear authenticity and reject authenticity because of their own lack of self-awareness. Self-awareness is knowing your own beliefs, knowing your own values. And sometimes people don't actually know what they believe. They just believe something because they were told it and they don't know why they believe it. They don't know their own values. They don't know why they do the things they do. Like, they just have a lack of self-awareness. They're not aware of what's going on around them or what's going on inside of them. I think another thing that is really prevalent in why people fear and reject authenticity oftentimes in society is because of the resistance to change. There's always a cultural bias. As an American, I have a cultural bias. And so things that people believe or do or say or experience in other countries, I don't understand. I don't know what I don't know. So there is a cultural bias. And oftentimes, when we have a resistance to change, it's because we're living in that biasness and we're taking that biasness as absolute truth. And this can be historical bias, it can be cultural bias, it can be religious bias, and it can be just social bias in general. And so when we're afraid of change and we have a resistance to change because we desire comfort rather than being open, oftentimes we're not open and we're not really truly being authentic. It can hinder authenticity. Internalized beliefs. This is a huge one. Sometimes people have such negative beliefs about themselves and their abilities that they are just not capable of being their true selves because they don't even, again, there's no awareness of who they truly are. They just have these internalized beliefs of who they are because of what they've been told by society or their family, or they have these negative limiting beliefs within themselves that don't allow them to actually be the full person that they were created to be, to authentically be their true selves because of those limiting beliefs, those negative things that they think about themselves. And I think the last one of why people most often reject or fear authenticity is because predictability is comforting. When we don't like uncertainty, which is most of us, myself included, I don't really like uncertainty and don't crave it necessarily. It's not comfortable. And so we crave being comfortable. We want to be comfortable. We want certain things. We want security. And I'm not saying that security is bad. Please don't hear me say that, because security is needed to be healthy. But predictability in and of itself is a comfort. And so living more authentic means we risk more, and there's going to be more uncertainty in our lives just because of risk and because we are more open when you're more authentic. So what are signs of someone who is being authentic, who is living authentically? I think signs of someone who's living authentically are a handful of things. They are someone who is they make decisions in alignment with their values, their actions, and their choices align with their beliefs. So they're not going to do something and then do something the exact opposite. There's going to be an alignment and a pattern to how they live their lives. And it's going to be a healthy pattern. And they're going to, it's just all going to make sense. Like when they make a decision, it's going to make sense. And sometimes right at first, it might not make sense because we're not that person and we don't understand. But over time, you're going to see how they're still aligning with their values and beliefs, even when they maybe make a decision that is surprising to us. But this means they're living authentically. There's an inner peace that this person will have when they're living authentically. There's just a sense of harmony, a sense of contentment in their life. There's more joy in their life. There's just overall peace. There's like a peaceful energy that emanates from this person when they are living their most authentic life and they're being their most authentic self. This person will also have genuine connections. When you meet someone who is authentic, they're going to have deep, quality relationships with people. They're going to be meaningful relationships. They're going to be probably longer term relationships. You're going to see a pattern of commitment from this person. And they're going to have commitment relationships where they have been in it for the long haul. They are their most authentic self. And I think when you meet someone who is very authentic and living a very authentic life, they are going to have a lot of self-acceptance. They are going to embrace both their strengths and their weaknesses. And they're going to have a really good sense of direction for their life and a purpose for their life. And they're going to always be moving towards that purpose and that clear sense, despite their weaknesses. And they're going to lean into their strengths in order to do that, to move towards their purpose. And I think the last thing that is really prevalent in people who are very authentic and living very authentically is they emanate vulnerability in a very strong way. And what I mean by that is that they are very open and honest with their strengths and their weaknesses. They are open and honest and open to other ideas. They're flexible. They will listen to others and really hear what they're saying. They're an active listener. And they are someone who allows themselves to be vulnerable so that they can grow and they can change and they can learn. They're about growth. They're about reaching goals. They're about evolving. So I think that those are signs of someone that is super genuine and living authentically as their true selves. And you can trust that person a lot more because of these signs that they're showing. So we've talked about why people fear it and how we can recognize authenticity. Quickly, why, despite all the fears and despite the rejection that can happen and the vulnerability that needs to happen, why should we be more authentic? And I think I kind of hit on some of these with why, like how you can recognize authenticity, but quickly, why we want to live more authentic lives is because we have increased self-awareness when we are living more authentic. When we have more self-awareness, we attract more abundance in our life. We attract good things in our life. And we can just live more authentically. And when we're living more authentically, we're attracting more abundance. We're living a good life. We're living an amazing life, a purposeful life. We will have stronger relationships when you're living more authentic because they're deeper and they're not surfacey and they are resilient relationships oftentimes because they've been through things. You'll have greater happiness and joy, just contentment in your life because you're being true to yourself and you're being true to your own beliefs and value system. You'll have reduced stress because then you don't have to remember lies that you told or have a certain persona or a mask that you need to put up. It's just less stress that way because you're just being real and you don't have to remember, oh, I need to be this way with this person or that with that person or in this situation. You'll have a lot more personal growth too when you are living more authentically because you're more goal oriented, you're evolving, you're open to change, you're being honest and open with yourself. And I think just living more authentically means that you have a more positive impact on yourself and others because when you are more authentic, that inspires others and encourages others to also be their more authentic selves, that they can lower their masks and they can be real as well. So how do we do this? How do we do it? Because I love to give you guys the practical. How do we live more authentically? I think there are 4 ways that we can live more authentically. The first one is, again, increasing our self-awareness. We have to be more aware of our beliefs, who we are, the internal work that needs to be done, our strengths, our weaknesses. And I'm going to give you guys some questions for each of these 4 ways to be more authentic, because I think asking ourselves questions, gives us more answers, and oftentimes more questions too, which can be a good thing. So we need to reflect on our own beliefs and values. And I think the questions that we ask ourselves in order to do this are, what are my goals and aspirations for my life? What emotions or feelings do I feel about situations, about people, about my life in general right now? What do I struggle with? Like, what am I struggling with? And what weaknesses do I actually have in my life? What relationships, how are my relationships really? Like, are my relationships deep, or are they more surfacey? And do I need to give more to my relationships, or do I need more for my relationships? And what are my limiting beliefs? These are, what am I believing about myself that's not true? How am I limiting my own self through my own thoughts? I think these questions are questions that can help us have more self-awareness about ourselves and our own needs. The second thing that we need in order to live a more authentic life and be more authentic in general is to challenge our beliefs. So challenging those limiting beliefs. So some questions that we can ask ourselves is what I believe and what I have value for, is this based on facts, or is this based on assumptions? Is this based on what I was told or taught, or is this based on something that I actually know and believe for myself? Where did this belief come from? Where did this value come from? Is it because sometimes our values and our belief are wrong? Like, they're just not okay. They're bad. They're evil. We all have some of those, and they're based on things that we were taught, or based on what we've seen and what we've experienced. And they're not necessarily true. It's not necessarily truth. So finding out and figuring out where that belief or value came from can be very, very helpful, because the source matters. The source of where our beliefs come absolutely matter. And do I hold out on this belief and have this value out of comfort, or am I afraid to let it go for a reason? Like, am I afraid of maybe what a community or a society or a family member or the people that I'm around? Am I worried about what they're going to say about me? Am I going to be rejected? And what would it look like if I let go of this belief? What would it look like? This brings us more self-awareness, and these questions will really challenge our beliefs, so that we can know that our beliefs are true and right and good and authentic and genuine for ourselves, and not someone else's, or based on falsities. The third thing to be more authentic and live more authentically is setting and maintaining boundaries. We talk a lot about boundaries, and I think there are some questions we need to ask ourselves in order to be able to hold boundaries better and to create boundaries. The first one is how do I need to protect my time and my energy? Like, right now, in certain situations in our life, we may not be protecting our time and energy. We may be giving it out too much, too freely, and we need to set a boundary, but we don't even know where to start. So that question of, how do I need to protect my boundary, or where do I need to protect my boundary? Where do I need to protect my time and my energy that I'm not doing already? And how do I need to reinforce this boundary? Like, what do I need to do, or what do I need from others in order to reinforce this boundary and be able to maintain it in a healthy way? And I think the last question that we need to ask ourselves about setting boundaries is, how do I need to restore a boundary when and if and when, because boundaries will be pushed. How do I need to restore boundaries that maybe I've already put in, or in the future, boundaries that I put in that have been violated? How do I restore a boundary that has been violated? Because boundaries are going to be pushed, especially by people who we've not had boundaries with before. When we put up a boundary, they are going to push it always, 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 always. And then the fourth thing to live a more authentic life is being honest with ourselves. And this goes back to self-awareness, but I think there are some specific questions that we need to ask ourselves in order to be truly honest with ourselves. And I think that the first one is what are my true motivations and intentions for what I'm doing in my life, my relationship in my life, the choices that I'm making in my life right now? What are the motivations and intentions of those choices? And I think this is a question we can ask ourselves often when we have to make a choice about something, when we have to make a decision. Like, what is that motivation behind it? What is that intention behind it? Is it, well, I don't want to get into that, but I think that's a really good question that we can ask. Another question we can ask is, am I avoiding my feelings and emotions in this situation? And why am I avoiding those feelings and emotions in this situation? And I think the last question we have to ask ourselves is, am I being honest about my thoughts and feelings about a situation? And am I being honest with myself about my own strengths and weaknesses? Do I need help? And do I need to reach out to someone else in order to kind of clear up some of these feelings that I am either rejecting or hiding or not paying attention to? Okay. So our challenge. I think our challenge is to ask ourselves some of these questions that I've been asking so that we can be more authentic. pick one of the categories of the 4 categories of being more authentic and ask yourself some of those questions that I brought to you. What are some of the ways that you can be more authentic? I think asking yourself that question right off the bat is, how do I need to be more authentic? Do I need to challenge my beliefs? Do I need to be honest with myself? Do I need to set more boundaries? Or do I just need to have more increased awareness? Like, maybe that's the thing. And then ask yourself those set of questions. All right. It's a lot, right? It's going to be a great weekend, guys. All right. Be authentic. Be yourself. Have a great weekend.